Load up. Good girl. Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. Picking up where we left off in the last video, talking about whether dog training is dead or we need to reset expectations. We're going to be doing this video talking about resetting expectations and kind of the difference between a well-behaved dog and a well-trained dog, because back when I was in the military working with dogs that were trained to save lives, those are objectively well-trained dogs, but they weren't always the best behaved, and we're going to tell you a couple of stories about that and the difference. Meanwhile, Dixie's going to go with us to the school pickup line, and you guys are going to see how well she behaves without even really having to be told. So let me run in and grab lunch, and then we're going to get to it. Nope, you get in the back. All right, so now we got our lunch. We got some Art's barbecue. We got a Stevens bowl that has some chicken, some rice, some beans, and then one of their special garlic aioli sauces. And then we also got a little bit of brisket to go with that. If you're coming through NorCal, make sure to check them out. They are absolutely delicious. And while I'm doing that, Dixie is gonna hang out in the back, and she is just gonna be the goodest girl. She's not gonna bark at everybody. She's not gonna excessively mooch for food, although if she's really, really good, she might get herself a little piece of brisket, because I like to share with my dogs. I think a lot of people share that sentiment just based on the way that dogs hover around the kitchen table. And so while I'm not opposed to sharing with the dog, they have to mooch with manners, right? We don't want her crawling up and all over on me while I'm trying to eat. And so as long as she hangs out back there, there might be a little bit of a snack in it for her. But she has to be well behaved, so we'll see how that all shakes out. Look at that, we're the first ones here. Whoop, whoop. Well-behaved versus well-trained dogs. Obviously, we have the ability as trainers to train dogs to do some incredible things, up to and including locating and alerting us to the presence of explosives. And that was where I actually got my start as a dog handler and trainer, was in the Air Force as a military working dog handler. And so my very first dog, he was very well trained, but he was very also poorly behaved. And that's because when they're going through their boot camp, as it were, they don't spend a lot of time on potty training or leash manners, but basic behaviors like sit, down, out, recall, all of those behaviors are taught to a minimum proficiency. So when it comes time for us to go on trips, whether it's to support the Secret Service or if we just go overseas for a deployment for a longer setting, either way, there is a little bit of an adjustment period for a lot of these new dogs, because again, they just don't know how to behave in a hotel room or how to behave in a deployed field kennel or any of these environments where excessive barking or reactivity isn't the best behavior for the dog to have. But again, that's not something that they work on going through their basic training. It's something that we are expected to fix out in the field. And so when I was on my very first Secret Service mission, we'd got done with work, and at the end of the day, we were back in our hotel room getting ready for bed, and I'd taken his Kong and I'd kind of put it up onto a high table where I thought that he couldn't get it. So I went to sleep, and a couple hours later I hear squeak, squeak, gnar, gnar, and apparently he had jumped up on there at some point and he had helped himself to his Kong that he wasn't supposed to have. Well, not a big deal. I take the Kong away from him and I put it into a dresser drawer, figuring that would be sufficient. Now no longer can he find it, because, or no longer can he get to it. He can find it all he wants, but he can no longer get to it. And I didn't think that he would scratch or tear the thing up, because why would he? He hasn't done that to this point. So I put the thing in there, go back to bed, wake up a couple hours later to him just clawing and going nuts on that dresser that was there. And so took the Kong out of that and put it up into the closet and something that he couldn't actually scratch, and got a couple hours of sleep before we had to go back to work. That was our very first trip together. And I remember thinking, like, man, this dog is very, very well trained. Like, he can find bombs and he can save life. And, I have no doubt in his abilities there, but like, I can't even imagine trying to be at home with this animal. Like, it would just be a nightmare trying to keep him from either getting into things or from barking at everybody, or just any of those working dog-esque behaviors that are not compatible with pet ownership. And so as I've kind of transitioned over into focusing on pet training, now I notice a lot of people want, that military or precision style obedience where it's very crisp, very fast. And a lot of times when your dog is doing something bad, like jumping socially or barking reactively, we try to use obedience as a redirection. So if the dog's jumping, we'll say, no sit, no sit, no sit. And no sitting will get accomplished, but the dog will kind of stop jumping, and we'll stop telling the dog to sit, and then we'll go on with our interaction. And so the dog eventually learns, like, all right, I don't have to pay attention to the sit, but once I stop jumping, like, I can go back to doing whatever it is that we were doing. and life continues on, and there's no actual real discouragement from jumping. It's just the encouragement to do something else. And so as a pet trainer, people, when they reach out for all kinds of issues that they have, whether it's, reactivity, separation anxiety, resource guarding, any of those things, the standard expectation is that we go to work and we start working on places and sits and downs. And yeah, we do those things, but not because a place or a sit or a down is ever going to be the solution to the problem. The teaching the dog how to cooperate with the owner along that learning spectrum is what is ultimately going to make the difference in that pet owner and that dog's life later, when something happens where the dog gets triggered by the Amazon guy or company coming over, and you're able to say, no, stop it. And the dog actually goes, oh, okay, I know what I'm not supposed to be doing. I know what I am supposed to be doing, and is able to redirect, versus just staying in this constant management where we're having to tell the dog sit and sit and sit and no, and ultimately not really getting anywhere, but in the moment it kind of works. And so, there is a huge difference between a well-behaved dog and a well-trained dog. You can see she's back there. I've got my food out. And while she was interested in it, she didn't aggressively come up and try to get any. She wasn't trying to, force her way into any of it. But if I held a spoonful back here right now for her, I'm sure she'd be happy to get her some chicken. There you go. See, she'll happily take some, and then she'll go right back to doing whatever she wants to do. But the whole point is, she's sitting back there and she's being patient, and she's not aggressively begging. Anyway, as you can see, Dixie is very well behaved. Shit, get out of here. Bro, you ain't getting none of this barbecue. That was a close one. But anyway, when it comes to, resetting some of our expectations, in the working dog world, the expectation is that we were proficient enough at the detection of explosives that we could go into any environment, whether it was a roadway search, whether it was a school, whether it was Walmart for a bomb threat, all kinds of different scenarios and situations, and still be expected to locate that potentially dangerous device. But for pet owners, we don't have the same expectation for our pets that the working or the sport dog world does, and we don't have the same need for, enthusiasm. Sure, we have the need for reliability when it comes to the dog should be able to walk on a loose leash, the dog should be able to recall. Those are things that should be reliable. But we don't have the same need for a 3-minute down stay that the military working dog handlers use as a minimum proficiency standard for their sit stay exercise. But that's, again, not something that necessarily pet owners need. It's something that is a pathway to building up the communication that the pet owner ultimately needs to be able to integrate their dog with them into their lifestyle. And when it comes to most people that I talk to's expectation for their pets, it's really just the same basic expectation that I have, and that is, when company comes over, you don't jump on them and have bad manners when you greet them. You're not allowed to mooch, and if you don't, you might get some noms out of it. If we're out and about in public and I've got you off leash, I expect you to come back whenever I call you, and not turn it into some game where you're going to stay right outside of the area that I can reach you and make me chase you around and stuff. No, you come over and you get leashed up, and then we continue on with whatever adventure holds. That the dog goes outside to go potty, doesn't relieve themselves in the house or in their kennel or in protest for being in their kennel. Most folks appreciate and understand the need for a kennel. Whether their dog appreciates and understands the need for a kennel is a whole other topic, but most people at least make the attempt to try to kennel train their dog, and that's a pretty important one if the dog is going to be without supervision. But the dog should be cool with it. It shouldn't be something that's a big deal to the dog. And other than that, people generally want their dogs to have some obedience, to be able to sit and to down. And, we can teach the dogs those things, but most people don't need, like I said, a competition obedience dog or a working protection dog or anything crazy like that. And if we don't have all those extra unnecessary expectations rattling around in the mix, it's a lot easier to get to this result that we want. All right, y'all, that about wraps it up for this video. I'm going to get back to eating some of this delicious barbecue. Like I said, Dixie's probably going to work her way into some because she's back there being the goodest girl. Y'all take care.